Am I the a-hole for breaking a promise to my dying husband and letting myself fall in love again? 10 years ago, I lost the man I thought I would grow old with. My husband, my partner, my everything, taken by a cruel and unforgiving illness that stole not just his life, but the life we had planned together. Watching him fade away, day by day, was a pain I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But nothing could have prepared me for what came after. When he passed, I was handed a $150,000 medical bill like it was just another piece of mail. That single envelope shattered what was left of my already broken world. We had always been careful with money, but this was a mountain I couldn't even begin to climb. And then, as if fate hadn't punished me enough, I lost the baby too. We had been trying for a child before he got sick. When I found out I was pregnant, it was like a sliver of hope in all the darkness. But the stress, the grief, the weight of everything, I miscarried not long after his funeral. I didn't even tell anyone at first. How do you grieve for two people at once when the world only knew about one? I sold our home, the house we'd dreamed about, decorated together, filled with love and laughter. The walls still smelled like his cologne. I couldn't take it. I packed everything, left behind everything that wasn't a necessity, and moved to a small apartment in a city where no one knew my name. I just wanted to disappear. People like to say that being a widow is hard. But it's not just hard. It's disorienting, it's lonely, it's walking into a room and forgetting what you came in for, because you're still half expecting him to be sitting on the couch. It's cooking for two out of habit, and crying when you realize the plate won't be used. 10 years passed, and I still wore my wedding ring. Not out of denial, but because taking it off felt like erasing him. I carried a photo of our first ultrasound in my wallet, like a secret I couldn't let go of. I told myself I didn't need love anymore, that I had already had the best, but the truth is, I didn't think I deserved it. I spiraled. For a while, alcohol became my blanket. I didn't drink to forget. I drank to dull the sharpness of remembering. No one called me out because no one was there. I had made sure of that. I kept my job, kept my head down, lived quietly. I wasn't living, I was just surviving. And for a long time, I was convinced that would be the rest of my life. It started like most unremarkable days. A cold, drizzly Tuesday. I was standing in the grocery store checkout line, clutching a box of granola bars and a bottle of wine I didn't really need. My coat was soaked through, and my hair clung to my face in a way that made me feel invisible. But I liked it that way. Invisible meant untouchable. That's when I saw him. Not in some movie magic sparks flying kind of way. No, he was arguing with a cashier, polite but clearly frustrated, trying to calm a little girl who was very loudly proclaiming her need for the pink cookies, not the stupid green ones. She was adorable, in that whirlwind tornado kind of way kids can be, wearing rain boots and a mismatched jacket, her blonde curls sticking out of a too small hoodie. Mark, her dad, looked exhausted. But not in a bitter way, just the kind of tired that says this is hard. But I love her more than I hate the chaos. The cashier scanned my things while I watched their little drama unfold. I handed over a $5 bill to cover the difference when Mark realized he was short on cash. It was impulsive, something I never did. I didn't even look at him as I did it. Just handed it over and muttered, "Been there." He looked at me for a beat, really looked. And then he smiled. Not a flirtatious one, but warm, genuine, and filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, gratitude. We left the store at the same time. He caught up to me in the parking lot, his daughter skipping beside him, pink cookies now firmly in hand. "You didn't have to do that," he said. I shrugged. "It's fine." "Still," he replied, offering his hand. "I'm Mark, and this little hurricane is Lily." I shook his hand. "Hope." "Fitting name," he said, smiling again, and I felt something shift, just the tiniest tilt of the earth beneath my feet. We ended up standing there for almost 20 minutes in the rain, talking, just small things, nothing profound. I learned he was divorced. I told him I was a widow, my voice cracking on the word before I could stop it. He didn't push, just nodded, as if he understood that grief was a house with many locked rooms. We parted ways without exchanging numbers. I figured I'd never see him again, but I did. The next week, in the park. Then again at a cafe near my office. Lily would run up to me like we were old friends, which meant Mark had no choice but to follow. We kept bumping into each other, and eventually I stopped believing it was coincidence. He started bringing 2 coffees instead of 1. One afternoon, he asked if I wanted to join them for ice cream. I hesitated, then said yes. It was the first time in years I laughed without feeling guilty. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. At first, I told myself it was just casual, friendly. A man with a daughter who liked my company, nothing more, nothing risky. But that lie unraveled fast. Mark had this quiet persistence about him, not pushy, not loud, just consistent. Every Thursday, he brought me coffee. Every weekend, there was an invitation to something small, a park picnic, a bookstore stop, lunch at the zoo with Lily. He always gave me an easy out like he knew I needed one, but I kept saying yes. Still, the wall around me was very much intact. Even as I smiled, even as I let him into pieces of my routine, I kept the door locked on my deeper thoughts. I never invited him inside my house. I never told him the small things, like how I still slept on only one side of the bed, or how I sometimes reached out for Daniel in the dark. One evening, after a picnic at the botanical gardens, he asked if I wanted to come back to his place for dinner, just him and Lily. No pressure, he said, watching me carefully. My heart thundered in my chest. The last time a man invited me to dinner, it was Daniel, setting the table with wine glasses and candlelight. I nearly said no, but then Lily tugged at my sleeve. You have to try Daddy's spaghetti. It's like magic. So I went. And it was nice. Too nice. That's when the guilt punched me in the stomach. When I got home that night, I sat in my car for over an hour in the driveway, trying not to cry. I wasn't supposed to move on. Not this fast, not this soon. It didn't matter that it had been over 2 years since Daniel died. My heart still wore mourning black. I started pulling away after that. I returned his texts slower. I skipped a few weekend invites, told him work was busy. I needed space. He never pressed, but I could see the hurt in his eyes whenever we did cross paths. One rainy afternoon, he showed up outside my work with coffee and a hesitant smile. You're pulling away, he said gently. I'm just overwhelmed. I'm not trying to replace anyone, Hope. I'm just trying to know you. Be there. I looked down, ashamed. It's not you. It's me. I don't know how to do this again. Mark paused. Neither do I. That was the first time I saw his pain, raw and unguarded. He told me more about his divorce that day. The betrayal, the confusion, the months of wondering if he was enough. I've got wounds too, he said. But I think healing's easier when you don't do it alone. That night, I sat on my porch and cried for an hour. Not just for Daniel, but for the version of me who had stopped believing anything good could come again. The wall didn't fall overnight, but a window opened, and Mark was there, waiting patiently on the other side. It didn't happen with fireworks. There was no single kiss under the rain, no grand declaration in a crowded room. Falling for Mark happened like watching the seasons change. Quiet, gradual, beautiful in ways I didn't expect. It started with the little things. Like the way he always remembered how I took my tea, black, no sugar, just like Daniel used to, but never made a fuss about it. Or how he started carrying tissues in his coat pocket because he knew I cried during every Pixar movie we watched with Lily. He never asked for more than I was ready to give. That mattered. When I finally invited him into my house, for real, not just for a drop-off or a quick hello, he walked slowly through the front hallway, his eyes catching on the framed photos of Daniel and me. He didn't flinch, didn't stiffen, just smiled softly and said, "He looks like he loved you a lot." "I loved him more than life," I said. "Still do." Mark nodded. That makes sense. He never tried to erase my past. He just wanted to find a place beside it. One night he came over after a particularly rough week. Lily had a cold, and Mark had been running between work, doctor visits, and sleepless nights. I made soup, bad soup, the kind you only make when your heart's in it, but your recipe is non-existent. We sat on the couch, too tired to talk. Lily was asleep in the guest room, and the rain tapped lightly on the windows. Mark leaned back and whispered, "This feels like peace." I felt it too. I reached out instinctively and took his hand. It wasn't some bold romantic gesture. It was just comfort. Real. Solid. Warm. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just let our hands rest together. fingers interlocked like two puzzle pieces that had been waiting a long time to find each other. After that, things began to shift. Slow, tender movements towards something more. We started taking long walks alone, just the two of us, sharing pieces of our past like trading seashells at the beach. We weren't trying to impress each other. We were trying to know each other. I told him about the first time I met Daniel, how he made me laugh so hard I spilled coffee all over my blouse. Mark told me about the time he almost proposed to his ex in the worst restaurant imaginable. We laughed, we cried, we didn't rush. The first time we kissed, it felt like both a beginning and a goodbye. I had to close the chapter with Daniel, really close it, before I could open this new one with Mark. So I visited the cemetery the next morning, alone. I sat at Daniel's grave and told him everything. About the pain, the guilt, the fear. And then I told him about Mark. How kind he was. How patient. How good he was with Lily. How, for the first time in years, I felt something close to joy. "I'll never stop loving you," I whispered. "But I think I'm ready to love someone else too." When I got back to my car, there was a message on my phone. "Mark. No pressure, no expectations, just thinking about you and hoping your heart feels a little lighter today." It did. For the first time in a long, long while. Just when everything began to feel warm again, the cold returned. It started with a phone call. I was at Mark's house. Lily was at a sleepover, and we were finally having a quiet night. Takeout, a movie, and a cozy silence that only exists between people who trust each other. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But grief teaches you not to ignore the unexpected. "Mrs. Holloway," the voice said. "This is Officer Keene. There's been an incident involving your late husband's car. I believe you'll want to come in." Daniel's car had been totaled in the accident that killed him. Or so I thought. But apparently there was a second vehicle, one he'd purchased in secret, registered under his name but stashed away in a rental garage 2 towns over. The police had found it when someone broke into the unit. Inside, they discovered a briefcase with documents, cash, and a notebook filled with names I didn't recognize. It didn't make sense. Daniel had always been transparent, organized, predictable. The discovery unraveled something in me. I fell into a spiral. Memories suddenly felt unreliable. I couldn't stop asking questions. Why would he hide something from me? Was he in trouble? Was I living in a lie? Mark tried to help, but I pulled away. I didn't mean to, but my grief morphed back into suspicion, fear, and guilt. I hated that part of me, the version of myself that distrusted happiness. He didn't push, not at first. But eventually, Mark sat me down. "You're shutting me out," he said gently. "Not just emotionally, physically. You've barely looked me in the eye in 3 days." "I don't know who I was married to," I whispered. "What does that say about me? About my judgment?" "It says you're human, that you trusted someone, that he made mistakes, but hope. He's gone. You're still here. You can keep punishing yourself, or you can let someone love you through it." "I don't want you to be a bandage," I said. Mark's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "I don't want to be either, but I do want to be here, and I want you to let me." That night, I didn't sleep. I read every page of Daniel's notebook. Most of the names were old colleagues, business contacts, nothing illegal. But there were also appointments with a therapist I'd never known he was seeing. And there it was, in the final pages. "I'm scared to tell Hope I'm not okay. She sees me as strong. If she knew how often I wake up at 3 a.m. feeling like I'm drowning." My chest cracked open reading that. Daniel wasn't living a secret life. He was just hurting and hiding it to protect me. I cried. For him. For myself. For the years we both spent pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. And then I called Mark. When he picked up, I didn't speak right away. Just breathed. "Hey," he said softly. "I miss you," I whispered. "Then come home," he replied. Coming back to Mark wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like in the movies. No rainstorms, no mad dash through traffic. Just me, standing outside his door with a small overnight bag and a heart that felt a little lighter than it had in months. He opened the door, already knowing it was me. He didn't smile right away. He just looked at me like he'd been holding his breath since I left. I read the notebook, I said. He was struggling. I didn't know. Mark nodded, letting me talk. I've spent so much time holding on to the version of Daniel that I wanted to remember. I didn't want to make room for reality. And when I found out he wasn't okay, I took it personally. I made it about me. I think I was scared that if I accepted his pain, I'd have to admit mine too. Mark stepped aside so I could come in. I didn't. Not yet. I don't want to be stuck anymore, I said, voice barely above a whisper. I want to move forward. Not away from Daniel, but forward with the parts of him that still live in me. And I want to move forward with you. That's when he reached out. Not with words, but with arms. He pulled me in and held me like someone who knew how to hold grief, not fix it. We didn't talk much that night. We made tea. We sat on the couch. He put on a playlist, quiet, acoustic stuff, and we just existed beside each other. I leaned into him, and when I closed my eyes, I didn't see gravestones or empty beds. I saw a second chance. The next morning, Lily ran into the kitchen in her pajamas and froze when she saw me sitting at the table. "You stayed over?" she asked, blinking. I hesitated. Mark looked at me, and I could feel the shared thought between us. Be honest, be brave. "Yes," I said, "and I'd like to stay over more if that's okay with you." Lily studied me like only a child could, deeply, curiously, and with a heart that hadn't yet learned how to lie to itself. "Okay," she said, "but only if you make waffles." We laughed. I made the waffles. Later that week, Mark and I went to the park. There was a festival going on, kids screaming over cotton candy, someone strumming a guitar under a tree, couples holding hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. We walked in silence, then found a bench beneath a big maple tree. "I still get scared," I admitted. "Me too," he said, but not scared enough to walk away. That was it. That was the shift. Not some epic confession or dramatic kiss. Just two people sitting in the soft breeze of a spring evening, choosing deliberately and quietly not to run anymore. Because love, real love, isn't just about how you feel. It's about what you choose every day. The cemetery looked different in spring. Where it once felt hollow and gray, it now carried a strange kind of warmth. Birdsong, bright little flowers pushing through the grass, and sunlight filtering down like a soft hand on your shoulder. Mark stood beside me, holding my hand. Lily was a few steps ahead, clutching a bunch of yellow daisies she'd picked from our front yard. She knelt down carefully in front of Daniel's headstone and placed them there, just like we talked about. "Hi, Daniel," she said, not awkward or unsure, just kind. "Hope you like flowers. Hope you know how much hope loves you." I held back tears, not because I didn't want to cry, but because they weren't the same kind of tears anymore. These weren't heavy with guilt or grief. These were soft, reflective, gentle. Mark looked over at me. "You okay?" I nodded. "I think I am." We didn't stay long, just long enough. Long enough to pay respect, long enough to feel the presence of the past without being weighed down by it. Back at the house, Lily was helping me bake muffins. She stood on a stool at the counter, covered in flour and chocolate chips, her laughter echoing through the kitchen. Mark was in the living room, strumming his guitar, the same one he hadn't touched for months. I peeked around the corner, watching him hum along to a melody that felt warm and familiar. Something about it all felt full. Not perfect. Not tied up with a bow. But full. We weren't replacing anyone. We were adding. Adding to our memories. Adding to our daily routines. Adding love to a space that had once only known loss. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed and the house was quiet again, Mark and I sat out on the porch. He handed me a cup of tea and rested his head on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. I looked up at the stars. That it doesn't have to be one or the other. I can love Daniel, I can miss him, but I can also love this. Love you. Love what we're building. Mark smiled, a kind of quiet that spoke more than words ever could. "I think Daniel would be happy for you. For us." I reached for his hand and laced my fingers through his. I hope so. In the distance, a wind chime played its soft, unpredictable tune. I closed my eyes, not afraid of what the next day might bring, not dreading it, just ready. Because we were no longer broken people trying to fix each other. We were whole people, messy, healing, evolving, who had found something worth holding on to. And this was just the beginning.